Hello, my name is Tiffany Chang, and this is Conductor as CEO, where I share some of my ideas about leadership. I imagine a world where conductors make artistic organizations great, like CEOs make businesses great. First, by being of service to its people. For today's post, I wondered, what are you afraid of as a musician when you do your work? Are my fears the same as yours? If we could learn more about our fears, maybe we can gain more perspective. Perhaps we could even develop strategies to help ourselves achieve more and be happier doing so. So I decided to do an informal poll, and 60 people responded, and I want to thank each and every one of them for taking the time to help. I asked the participants to rank 12 fears. I then asked them whether they were conductors, instrumentalists, or singers. Within those categories, they identified themselves as either affiliated with an organization, affiliated with an academic institution, freelancer, or student. I was curious to see what kind of patterns I might find and insights I could draw from all this data. I do realize also that not everyone has all these fears, and that some of the fears may be related to each other. So this is not a scientific study by any means. Also, my sample size of 60 was quite small. So I will preface the rest of this post saying that I am not hoping to make any definitive conclusions or generalizations. I simply looked at the data I had available and remained curious. I'll start with sharing my reflections on general results of the survey. Here are the overall rankings of all the responses I received. Now, no matter how I grouped the data, underperformance, embarrassment, and rejection emerged as the top 3 each time. This was not surprising. In fact, it may give you solace simply knowing that everyone else faces these exact same fears. Here are some other interesting findings. Ease and change are both consistently within the bottom 3. This may show perhaps that musicians are generally resilient and adaptable to changes in our workplace, unlike other industries where people are more afraid of organizational changes. And that we're intrinsically motivated to keep growing. Job security is a low-ish fear for conductors at 9, compared to mid-ish for instrumentalists at 5 and singers at 4. Now, I found this interesting, and I wonder, why is that? Insignificance is high for conductors at 4, compared to lowish for instrumentalists and singers, both at 8. Now, if you want to nerd out and see more detailed results, comparisons, and my thoughts on them, feel free to click on the link below to access a separate document where I go through each item in length. There's a lot of interesting stuff there, but I don't want to really focus on that for the post today. Now, with our top 3 fears, musicians cannot easily make them go away because we've been programmed from day one to value achievement and affirmation of that achievement from our teachers, peers, the public, and even ourselves. Whether our fears are real or imagined, they affect us deeply. In a TED Talk, which I'll link below, Winch talks about how when we get hurt physically, like scraping our knee, we know to practice first aid, and we mend to the wound to make sure that it heals properly. But when we get hurt psychologically, like failure, rejection, or loneliness, we don't take care of these injuries. And quoting Winch from his talk, it doesn't even occur to us that we should. Oh, you're feeling depressed? Just shake it off. It's all in your head. Can you imagine saying that to someone with a broken leg? Oh, just walk it off. It's all in your leg. Doesn't make much sense. As leaders, it helps to keep in mind that musicians' top fears are, in fact, underperformance, embarrassment, and rejection. Those are the injuries that musicians are desperate to avoid and to heal. We can recognize that sometimes, in an attempt to avoid these fears, they end up actually underperforming or embarrassing themselves. We can start to see that underperformance is a result, a symptom of the fear, and perhaps not because they are incompetent or being nonchalant. In that light, what could we do to help prevent the cut from getting deeper, to stop the bleeding? Often, what happens is we either do nothing or we make the wound worse by poking at it. We make it clear that someone is not performing up to par and they need to work harder, often in a very public way. And we guilt trip them as a tactic to encourage them to do better. Now, these intentions may be positive and means to elevate our work, but I wonder if jabbing at the wound in the moment is really the best tactic. Maybe acknowledging the fears and their consequences on performance is all we need to start creating a culture of safety and high performance. But how can we help people lessen or get rid of those fears? Well, perhaps getting rid of them is not the path to beyond at all. Instead of removing those fears, we may actually be able to take advantage of them and use them as a catalyst for doing our best work. Now, bear with me as I explain. Let me ask you this. Despite the fear of making mistakes, failing, or embarrassing ourselves, why do we keep doing things that put us in that position? Well, it's because it actually feels good. Andrew Huberman from Stanford University calls fear a negative sensation that you don't know how to alleviate. It can paralyze us because we don't know what to do about it. We can also run away from the situation in flight mode. But sometimes we decide to fight and confront the fear. We jump off the diving board, we climb a mountain, or we play that piece from memory. When you take that step towards fear, you go into the space of courage. Fear and courage are two separate things. And what courage does is it releases dopamine, the reward chemical of your body, and you get a hit of pleasure. You don't actually need to wait to get to the top of the mountain to get this chemical released. Even one step towards confronting the fear gives you that dopamine. It's the body's way of saying, this is good for you, keep going. And here's the important thing. The only way to get this reward is if you have fear to fight with. So without fear, there's no reward. And I find that fascinating, and it completely debunks the idea of being fearless. And being fearless is not exactly what we think it is. It doesn't allow us to naturally be encouraged to move forward. Considering all this, what if what we could do to tend to our fear is to capitalize on this biological reward mechanism? Yes, performance is scary. We worked hard and we don't want it to go to waste in the one critical moment of the performance. But also consider this. We are often much less fearful in rehearsals than performances. We don't always confront the fear full on until the moment of the concert. So what if we practiced putting ourselves in that space of courage in every rehearsal and use our natural release of dopamine to edge us forward? Huberman also explains that the more we do this kind of activity involving courage, the more we rewire ourselves to seek the activity more because it makes us feel good. So what if we get into the habit of living on the edge every rehearsal, and a concert is just one other opportunity to do so? As musicians, we can be framing challenges with fear and encouraging ourselves to dash towards that fear all the time, knowing that there's going to be a reward waiting for us. We may not perform a perfect concert, but in the process, we may just have leveled up to a point beyond where we would have been had we waited to step into courage only at the concert. Now, our other big fear is rejection. So we refrain from taking risks, saying what we really want to say, or going for a great opportunity. We know now that being inactive about confronting this doesn't give us dopamine. So what if we can establish a culture that rewards this kind of courageous behavior? Maybe it's acknowledging someone for voicing their opinion, even if it eventually doesn't make it into the final product. Or offering an incentive for submitting an application for an opportunity. I've actually personally been the recipient of money for submitting an application. Or maybe it's valuing the valiant, out-of-the-box performance with a cracked note over the mechanically perfect one. Let's think about how we can activate what Huberman calls the courage circuit by putting ourselves in the position where we might get rejected or embarrassed or underperform. Let's remember that fear is necessary to have courage, and that's the space we want to occupy to become better. Now back to Guy Winch from the TED Talk. When we engage with these fears, there's no question that we are going to get hurt. What we don't want is to first encourage musicians to be courageous and then scold them for getting hurt. When we are hurt by choosing to confront our fears, let's normalize this result by acknowledging that it sucks, it hurts, it failed, and we feel crappy. Then follow up with bandaging the wound and giving it care over time so that it can withstand the next blow. This can be a simple check-in with a musician after a tough rehearsal. Winch calls this emotional hygiene, much like how we brush our teeth every day for dental hygiene. I've come to understand that deep empathy is crucial for a leader in order to serve their people. When something doesn't go well musically in rehearsal, it's so easy for us to jump to all sorts of negative conclusions. It's all X's fault. They didn't come prepared. Or they don't seem like they care about this at all. But we really have no idea what is actually causing that behavior. And fear is a real possibility, given that all of us face exactly the same fears. And it is really all about playing the game of how can I help them to help themselves be the best. If fear is a big part of that game, then we can use that to our advantage rather than see it as an obstacle. If these ideas resonate with you, please consider signing up in the link below to receive an email with each new blog post sent directly to your inbox. Thank you and have a great day.